The change never announces itself. It doesn't arrive with an argument or a crisis. It starts quietly, a missed call with friends, a hobby postponed, a choice deferred for the family. You tell yourself it's temporary, responsible, mature. You're building something now, but what you're really doing is shrinking piece by piece while calling it growth. And the scariest part is how good it feels at first, because sacrifice flatters the ego before it empties the soul. Marriage doesn't seize a man by force. It recruits him. It appeals to his strongest values: duty, loyalty, protection. You're not ordered to give up your time, you volunteer it. You're not forced to abandon your freedom, you trade it. Each trade feels fair in isolation. Each one costs almost nothing. Until one day you look around and realize there is no space left that belongs only to you. Not your schedule, not your money, not even your thoughts. Your friendships fade first, not because they were unimportant, but because peace at home becomes more important. One cancelled night becomes two. Two becomes a pattern. Eventually the invitations stop coming. You tell yourself it's normal. Men grow up, men settle down. But isolation isn't maturity. Isolation is leverage. A man without a tribe is easier to manage, easier to guilt, easier to reshape. Then your time disappears. Free hours are absorbed into errands, repairs, emotional labor, obligations that somehow always feel urgent. Rest becomes indulgent. Silence becomes suspicious. Solitude becomes selfish. You learn to stay busy because being still invites conflict. The house runs smoothly when you're useful. Tension rises when you're not. Over time, you stop asking what you want to do and start asking what needs doing. Money is next. What was once yours becomes ours, but the control subtly shifts. Spending requires explanation, justification. Emotional accounting. You notice that your wants require defense while her wants arrive pre-approved. You don't argue because arguing feels petty. You pride yourself on being the bigger person. But power doesn't respond to nobility. Power responds to boundaries. All of this happens without a villain. That's what makes it work. No one is tying your hands. You're placing them behind your back yourself. Because you believe a good man provides, a good man adapts, a good man puts family first. And those beliefs are true, up to the point where they're used to erase you. A virtue without limits becomes a weapon. Look at the language we've always used. Ball and chain, getting hitched, taking the plunge. These aren't accidents. Cultures confess truths in jokes long before they admit them openly. Even celebration carries an undertone of loss. Something is ending, something is being surrendered. But modern narratives rush past that discomfort and call it love, because love sells better than honesty. During courtship, the dynamic feels equal. Desire is mutual, effort flows both ways. You are chosen, wanted, valued for who you are, not just what you do. Then commitment arrives and the axis shifts. Sex becomes conditional, affection becomes scheduled, agreement becomes compliance. The man adjusts, assuming this is what stability looks like. He doesn't realize stability has quietly turned into control. This isn't about cruelty, it's about biology and incentives. Once security is achieved, optimization begins. The system rewards extraction, not reciprocity. The more dependable you become, the less exciting you are. The more predictable, the less respected. You sense it, but you can't name it, because naming it would force you to confront a terrifying idea, that the love you're preserving may depend on you continuing to disappear. By the end of this chapter, you may feel uneasy. That's good. Unease means something is waking up. Because the real danger of marriage isn't divorce or conflict. It's something quieter, something far more permanent. The slow domestication of a man who confuses peace with purpose and calls it love while forgetting who he used to be. The next phase isn't about loss, it's about conditioning. By the time a man notices something is wrong, his nervous system has already adapted to the environment. He no longer reacts with anger or protest. He reacts with calculation. What will keep the peace? What will avoid the argument? What will prevent the cold silence that poisons the house for days? This is how a man learns to anticipate displeasure before it happens. And anticipation, repeated long enough, becomes obedience. Psychology calls this learned helplessness. When efforts to assert yourself lead only to punishment, emotional withdrawal, contempt, chaos, you stop asserting altogether. Not because you're weak, but because you're intelligent, you're responding to data. Every time you push back, the cost outweighs the reward. So you adapt. You lower your expectations. You quiet your needs. You convince yourself this is wisdom, maturity, emotional intelligence. In reality, it's survival behavior. This is where the most dangerous shift occurs. You stop seeing yourself as an agent and start seeing yourself as a tool. Your role becomes reactive. You fix problems that aren't yours. You absorb emotions you didn't cause. You manage moods you don't control. Slowly, your inner world empties. There's no space left for ambition, curiosity, or rebellion, only responsibility. A man who exists only to manage consequences has already lost his freedom. Over time, the mind creates a story to justify the suffering. Sacrifice becomes love. Endurance becomes virtue. Discomfort becomes proof of masculinity. You tell yourself real men don't complain. Real men provide. Real men endure. This narrative isn't random. It's reinforced everywhere. Movies praise the exhausted father. Religion sanctifies self-erasure. Society claps for the man who gives everything and asks for nothing. No one asks what it costs him. This is where something darker forms, a kind of domestic Stockholm syndrome. The man begins to identify with the system that exploits him. He defends it. He argues with single men who question marriage. He mocks men who want solitude or autonomy. He can't afford to admit the truth because admitting it would mean admitting he collaborated in his own erasure. So he doubles down. He becomes an evangelist for the very cage he lives in. Notice how conversations change. When men speak honestly about dissatisfaction, they're shut down quickly. That's just marriage. That's what being a man is. Stop being selfish. The message is clear. Your inner life is expendable. Your fulfillment is optional. Harmony matters more than truth. And once a man accepts that premise, he stops trusting his own perceptions. This is psychological defeat, not compromise. Meanwhile, the woman doesn't need to enforce control aggressively. The system runs itself. Guilt replaces force. Fear replaces threat. The possibility of conflict keeps you in line better than conflict ever could. You preemptively comply. You apologize when you're not wrong. You negotiate against your own interests to avoid tension. From the outside, it looks peaceful. From the inside, it feels like suffocation you're not allowed to name. This conditioning reshapes identity. You stop making decisions and start seeking permission. Not always verbally, but internally. You imagine the reaction before you act. You trim your desires down to what's acceptable. Over years, the gap between who you are and who you're allowed to be grows so large that you forget there was ever a difference. This is how men wake up in middle age feeling like strangers to themselves. Here's the irony. The more you surrender, the less you're respected. Compliance doesn't create safety. It creates contempt. What was once appreciated becomes expected. What was once praised becomes demanded. The system doesn't reward sacrifice, it consumes it. And the man, sensing the loss of respect, works harder, gives more, tries to earn back what cannot be earned once surrendered. This is the trap. The harder you try to save the relationship, the more you disappear inside it. And yet walking away feels impossible. Not because you're trapped legally or financially, but because you've been trained to believe that leaving would make you a bad man. That choosing yourself would be immoral. That suffering quietly is the price of love. But there's a crack forming now. Awareness. Once you see the conditioning, it starts to weaken. Once you name the pattern, it loses some power. In the next chapter, we confront the final layer. The truth about leverage, options, and why reclaiming your sovereignty terrifies the system more than anything else. The moment that truly threatens the system is not rebellion. It's indifference. Control survives on need. Leverage survives on dependence. The second a man stops needing approval, harmony, or validation, the balance shifts. That is why independence is framed as selfish and autonomy as abandonment. A man who can walk away cannot be managed, and a man who cannot be managed cannot be safely extracted from. Leverage is the quiet currency of relationships. The one with more options always has more power. Marriage works against men by narrowing those options intentionally. Social isolation, financial entanglement, moral obligation, legal consequence. Each layer reduces mobility, each reduction increases compliance. The tragedy is that men are taught this is love, when it is actually the removal of exit routes. Love without the option to leave is not love, it's enforcement. This is where most men make their fatal mistake. They try to negotiate better treatment by increasing effort. More patience, more understanding, more sacrifice. They believe fairness will be rewarded. But leverage doesn't respond to fairness. It responds to scarcity. When your time, attention, and presence are unlimited, they are worth little. When they are earned, they gain weight. Respect follows power, not intention. Watch the shift when a man quietly reclaims his center. He stops over-explaining, stops apologizing reflexively, stops asking permission to exist. He doesn't threaten, he doesn't argue. He simply acts in alignment with his own priorities. Something unsettling happens. Resistance appears. Emotional spikes, accusations of change, coldness, selfishness. These are not moral judgments. They are panic responses to lost control. At this stage, many men retreat. The pressure feels unbearable because it activates everything they were trained to fear: conflict, disapproval, abandonment. But this is the final test. The system escalates right before it loses its grip. Power always tightens before it breaks. If he holds his ground without cruelty or apology, the dynamic must reorganize. It always does. This is not about dominating women or punishing anyone. It's about refusing to disappear. A man who maintains boundaries without anger forces clarity. Either the relationship adapts to mutual respect, or it reveals that it was never mutual to begin with. Both outcomes are truth. Truth is expensive, but confusion costs more over time. The deepest fear men carry is not loneliness. It's being seen as disposable. Marriage exploits this fear by promising permanence in exchange for surrender, but permanence built on self-erasure is just slow abandonment. The irony is brutal. The more a man abandons himself, the more likely he is to be abandoned later. Utility declines, novelty fades, respect evaporates. Then the contract is renegotiated or terminated. Schopenhauer understood something modern men are discouraged from learning. Fulfillment cannot be outsourced. The moment you assign another person responsibility for your meaning, you place yourself beneath them psychologically. Love offered from below is never equal. It breeds resentment in the giver and contempt in the receiver. Only two complete individuals can meet without consumption. This is where sovereignty is rebuilt. Not through anger, not through withdrawal, but through purpose. A life that would still matter if no one approved. Work that demands respect because it has weight. Solitude that feels full, not empty. A man grounded in this way is no longer exploitable. He can give without losing, commit without shrinking, love without kneeling. Marriage then becomes optional. Not forbidden, not idealized. Optional, and that single shift terrifies every system built on male sacrifice. A man who doesn't need marriage to be whole evaluates it clearly. Terms, costs. Boundaries. He knows what he will not trade away. This doesn't make him cold. It makes him free. If this chapter forced you to think differently, don't dismiss that discomfort. It means something old is breaking, something honest is forming. Share this with a man who's been slowly disappearing and doesn't know why. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. These conversations only survive when men are willing to hear what they were never meant to question.